Hello everyone and welcome back to another Babbling Irons video with myself and Mike. And today, another link coming out for a midfielder in Yunus Musa, obviously the American international, still only 20 years old, so a very exciting young talent. And it's being linked that David Moyes is a big fan. This coming out today from the Mirror that we are really keen on signing the Valencia midfielder this summer. And David Moyes is a massive admirer of the player. And he's actually made it himself aware of the Hammers' interest and has made it clear that he wants the move to West Ham as well, which obviously bodes well for a potential transfer happening. So, Mike, another player that maybe a lot of West Ham fans probably wouldn't have heard of. He's actually on our thread. If you followed us on Twitter, you'll be able to see it. But here's kind of proof. May 27th, Mike put together a thread of players we should be looking at this summer. Musa was on there. So if you've seen that thread already, great. If not, we're going to go into more detail about the player here. Initial thoughts, Mike. £20 million is the rough figure being quoted for the 20-year-old. Is that a good price? And is it an exciting signing for you?
Yeah, I think it's a very fair price. I'm pretty sure last year there was talks around him going to a Premier League club and they were asking around about 30 million mark. Valencia have just staved off relegation this season. Valencia is a place that is a very beautiful place as well. If you've never been to Valencia, thoroughly recommend going. It's a beautiful place. But they had a torrid season last year. Financially, they've been not great for the last few years. And £20 million for Musa, I think is probably more than fair. To me, they're probably underselling on Musa. I think it's around about 25 to 20 million euro. I think 30 million was probably fair, but again, he's such a raw developing talent. I think it'd be difficult to convince someone to go for that 30 million mark. But if you're asking around 20 to 25, I know it's a difference of about 5 to 10 million, but that will convince teams to take the chance on him because he is a raw talent, but could be a very exciting one if you kind of get in now, essentially almost ground level with him.
Sure, yeah. I think most people probably would have seen some of the stuff that he'd done at the World Cup with America. That's where he kind of put himself on the map, if you would say that. And he's just continued to develop again this season. Although Valencia haven't done well, he's been the standout figure. And even last night, he was playing for America and he played really well. So Musa is a player, again, 20 years old. A lot of people saying, is he the Declan Rice replacement? Is he something else? What type of player is he for those that aren't aware? Because on our thread, we've had him as the kind of Lanzini replacement, if you will.
Yeah, I think his logical role within the club is to come in as that more advanced centre midfielder. So that Lanzini role. He's not the type I would suggest that comes anywhere near replacing Declan Rice. He just doesn't have that skill set I believe you need to have in which to be one half of the Declan Rice replacement, because as we've said constantly, you need two players to replace Deckers.
Yeah,
I don't think he fits on either side of that model required in which to replace him, because the second half is about replacing and upgrading on Souček, and I don't think he necessarily suits that type. Whereas if you put him in a role where it's like Lanzini can be that kind of further forward player, can probably operate a bit in that Lingard type of role. Now he needs big improvements to do a lot of what we would ask of Lingard, but again, exciting ground floor level type player. And he also has the flexibility not only to be able to play centrally, but he can play on the wings as well, because he has explosive pace and he is exceptionally quick.
that's what we need, a bit of pace in this squad.
Exactly. And if we can get that centrally as well, all of a sudden you've got a player that, whilst he's, you would say rough, you have a player that if you can find in between the lines and there's some space to move into, in transition, he is going to absolutely obliterate most midfielders, because there's not necessarily always a huge amount of pace in mid-centre midfield we tend to see at times. So to have someone like that who can just exploit any kind of space, he's used to kind of drifting into wide positions if needs be. So again, it could also mean that for someone like Bowen, it means he can drift further in field. And if you've got Musa in that right-hand side, he can then drift out into that right-hand position to ensure that you keep width, which is something we really struggle with. And again, if you have that player that can do that, again, if he's then playing in a free and we've dropped Souček, for instance, because that in that type of game is what we've gone for, he can do some of those runs that we see Souček tries to do, but he gets in that wing position. But he's then got the blistering pace to actually take on the fullback, to earn a foul, to earn a corner, to whip in a dangerous cross. So it gives us that continual threat on that right hand side, and also probably releases someone like Bowen in games where that's maybe the free combination we want to go for in midfield with Musa in there.
Okay, yeah, no, that sounds definitely what we kind of need in there because, again, like you mentioned, when Souček often will drift out to that right-hand side, it's very difficult for him to have that impact because A, he's not the best in tight spaces, as we've seen, and B, he's not, like you mentioned, he hasn't got that explosive pace that someone like Musa would bring. So looking at the kind of player profile of Musa from our thread here, we can kind of see the positives and negatives of the 20-year-old. Obviously, the estimated value of 30 million euros here. It's now being quoted that he could be available for a little bit cheaper than that, which would be great. So some of the positives, homegrown status. He can, like you mentioned, operate on the flanks or play in that central position. He's a really good progressive ball carrier, has really high potential, draws fouls, electric pace. So all of those positives sound really good. Talk to me about some of the kind of negatives, which we'll put back on the screen in a second, because like you mentioned, he's a raw talent and there are going to be maybe some frustrations early on with some of the stuff that he will produce on the pitch and maybe that lack of consistency.
Yeah, because, we have to remember he's come from a very good youth system initially because he came from Arsenal's youth system before moving out to Valencia and has pretty much been in their first team from the age of 18. So he's been playing a lot of first team football over the last 2 years, but predominantly been playing as a winger. So as we see with a lot of wingers, they're not always potentially the best in terms of ball retention because it's more about, how you dribble, how you carry the ball, taking on your man one on one. So these are sometimes the problem in how he's now transitioning into this centre midfield player, that his ball retention isn't as tight as it could be, isn't necessarily as good as it could be. He's still developing from the perspective of being not creative, but being a consistent kind of key passer or progressive kind of passer with better levels of accuracy. Because moving in field, you tend to get less time, or it's the fact again it's such a high volume tends to be. So there is one of the things he needs to improve on is his proficiency when he has the ball at his feet, because he isn't as tight when it comes to, say, like Lanzini in terms of that ball retention. He does try and force play a bit, because he's trying to be creative, trying to progress play. So you can have a few more turnovers because it's maybe less, I guess, safety first or less conservative.
Yeah.
But again, there are positive elements within, I guess, the negatives. And again, like some of the things are, drawing into silly fouls. But again, that's because he's learning a new role. Whilst he's decent defensively in terms of the work rate, because he's had to learn that by being a winger. Again, moving him in field, there's completely different kind of body shapes you're going to need to have, different kind of movements, different kind of players running around you. So he's still developing within that role. So he can still kind of make the silly young mistakes.
Yeah.
But again, as we said, at the age of 20, he's already showing great adaptability and he is rapidly improving in his assets. And if you've seen how he's played at the World Cup and how he's playing for the United States, then obviously you will notice that there is a very good young player within there. And we also have to caveat some of the statistics as well, because he has played largely right wing and centre midfield this year. So it does distort them slightly.
Yeah.
Because obviously wingers tend to be playing, tend to have a lot less options sometimes with their passes. So some of their passing is going to be a lot less. We see that with Jared Bowen, for instance, as a prime example. Then maybe you get in some sort of centre midfielders. But he is one that I would say is a very exciting one, and one of those types of players that when Moyes said he wanted young, hungry players with something to prove and to develop, this is the archetype or true kind of target we should be after in that regard and in that mould.
Okay, well, it's good that he kind of is being reported that he's interested in the move as well, because a lot of the time when we're linked to players, it's like, okay, we want this player, but then it turns out they're not interested. But this is one where he wants to move maybe to the Premier League. We've got European football. He's going to get plenty of minutes in cup competitions, rotation, like you mentioned, and that chance to develop in a in a more consistent way, because we need pace, like you mentioned. There's a tick. We need someone that's going to progress the ball with pace, another tick, and we need someone that we need to start targeting profiles that are much younger, because we've mentioned it before on this channel. The average age of our squad is very high in comparison to most in the Premier League. It could be even be the highest. So we need to start recruiting better, replacing someone like Lanzini, who is towards the end of his career, with someone younger, fresher, with that room to develop, is a great move. But I think the important thing to mention for those watching is he's not someone that's going to come in and be that Declan Rice replacement or immediate impact. It's someone that we're going to bring in to develop and to consistently grow over a period of time. That being said, there are other links coming out with other midfielders, which we will cover again very shortly in another video. So make sure to subscribe to see that. But final thoughts on Musa for £20 million, Mike. Would you give that the green light, go ahead and try and get that done as soon as possible?
Yeah, it's one that I would. If I'm looking at it in terms of order importance or in terms of a short list in that position, I would be going all out for Alex Scott first. I think he's a far more polished player, a year younger. He's been brilliant in the EFL, and I would personally move for him in that position above Musa.
Yeah.
But having said that, Musa is an exceptional player. Now, if a deal is available for 20 million euros, which is obviously then considerably less than, it's about 10 million pounds less than what it would cost to buy Alex Scott, you would argue that actually this is probably the smarter, more intelligent move, due to him being 20, having first team football since the age of 18, American international. There are many pieces within there, and obviously playing in a high class league in La Liga.
Yeah.
So you can argue that actually it makes sense, because if there's going to be around about £15 million as opposed to £25 million for Alex Scott, one is arguably more proven because of the league quality, and that being Musa. So you can understand why the club would do that. So it makes sense. I would have no issues with doing it. Obviously, I would also, the way I look at this position is we have one internal player in George Murphy that could be worth an actual shout as a promotion into the team to take that role and to kind of develop and bring through over time. And there's also, again, if we're looking external, the likes of Alex Scott, obviously Musa, and Samadic, who plays at Udinese, is another player that we could look at in that kind of 8/10 role, which is arguably really what this type of player really is.
Okay, that's really good recap of kind of everything about Musa and where we're kind of sat with whether it'd be a good sign or not. So with that being said, guys, let us know what you think in the comments. Would this be a signing you'd be excited by? Do these characteristics of Musa stand out to you? And yeah, let us know in the comments what you think. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel as always. And Mike, until next time,
Come on, you
Irons.